Welcome to the New Wealth Wave podcast hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. We're diving deep into the intricate layers of the 7-stage generational wealth model to offer invaluable insights on legacy building, wealth accumulation and preservation, and financial growth across generations. I'm Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and this is the New Wealth Wave podcast. Hey, future wealth builders, this is Dr. Joaquin Wallace, and welcome to another episode of the New Wealth Wave podcast. Today, we are delving into stages 4 and 5, and guess what? We may even tap into stage 2 as well. To lead the discussion will be Brian Seymour, who is the principal and founder of Prosperitage Wealth, a fee-only RIA dedicated to closing the racial gap by helping African-American professionals make intelligent money decisions through unbiased financial advice. I love that. Brian holds multiple designations, partly a CFP as well as the RICP as well, and was named to the American College of Financial Services 2024 Next Gen Advisory Task Force. Brian also has contributed to U.S. News and World Report, CNN, and the New York Times as well. Brian, thank you for coming on to the show.
Dr. Wallace, I really appreciate you having me on. Really excited to delve into the model, into a lot of the learnings, my experience, and really appreciate you having me on.
I've been admiring you from afar. I mean, the work you do, is outstanding. Again, you've been on several telecasts as well. I mean, you are in a position to help a lot of individuals. So first and foremost, if this is your first time tapping into the New Wealth Wave podcast, the show is based upon my 7-stage generational wealth model, which focuses on 3 phases of our lives: our past, the present, and our future. So let's get into the model itself. Stage 1 is our internal and external ecosystem. Stage 2 is our financial genetic code, which focuses on financial trauma and anxiety. Stage 3 is financial healing, which focuses on reprogramming stages 2 and 1 of our financial genetic code and looking at our internal and external ecosystem. Stage 4 is financial edification, which focuses upon financial literacy and inclusion. And stage 5 is financial well-being, which focuses on financial health, because that's so important, and not outliving our income. Stage 6 is generational knowledge, where we focus on creating our financial footprints in terms of estate planning to eventually get to stage 7, which is generational wealth. So, Brian, you had an opportunity to take a look at the model before coming on. What was your initial thoughts?
You know, it was refreshing to see a model that really focused on much of the whole person. I feel like too often we start in a place of the present, not recognizing that the past influences so much of not only how we got to where we're at, but how we are going to look to the future and the framework by which we make those decisions. So it was very encouraging. It was also nice to see that it didn't end, right? It was this continuous circle that even after you got to stage 6, there are different things that you will learn, that your future is going to circle back into your past and influence your present. And so it just seemed much more of a holistic model that I'm used to seeing in the literature.
And that's absolutely correct, because what I loved about the model when I created it about a year ago and kind of went through the trials and tribulations is basically me being transparent with myself, for one. And also, with many of the clients, I've been in the business for the past 8 years as a financial advisor, so to speak. And a lot of my clients that I assist constantly navigate through this model itself. They may be in the terms of their financial well-being, which is stage 5, which is their future or their present, but they may be dealing with issues in their stage 1 and 2 based upon their internal and external ecosystem, as well as their financial anxieties, which doesn't allow them to really participate in terms of the finances. And that, and we're going to talk about that as well. So before we get into the heavy lifting, this is an opportunity for you to tell our listeners and yours a fun fact about yourself.
I appreciate it. And, for the longest time, I would answer that question about my upbringing in Hawaii. But I think it was Dr. Thomas that recently mentioned that he was also a military brat. And so I started thinking, what else could I share? I don't know that it's necessarily a fun fact, but it's probably the most interesting. I actually delivered my youngest son in the car, completely unplanned, of course.
So I don't know what I would have done in that situation, but I would have reacted similar to what you did. But what was your initial thought when you're in your car driving and then the missus say, "Hey, listen, I'm about to deliver, my water is broken"? What was your initial thought?
So remember, this is my last child, and I have three. So my son and my daughter were in the back seat when this happened. So we're driving, thinking we're going to the hospital. And luckily, we had gotten there. The doctors hadn't made it out. Nobody was there. So I actually had to literally deliver him. But it was absolutely terrifying. And, my son is in the back seat, calming my daughter down, saying, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay." And I'm like, "Are you sure it's going to be okay?" Because I'm freaking out up here. And so it's funny when I tell my dad this story, again, retired military, he's like, "Oh, all you have to do is take off your shoelace and tie off the umbilical cord and bite off." And I'm like, I would have passed out way before I had a chance to do any of that. So I just know this is my calling, not medicine, because I know I couldn't do that again.
I'm not a person of blood and all of that as well. I probably would have fainted if I had to do that, but you never know what you could do in terms of the fight or flight, right? I mean, you have to do what you have to
Not
do.
into
We always ask a three-part question when we get into the podcast itself, because I believe this allows the end user, those who are watching the New Wealth Wave podcast, to kind of connect with our guests. So, before you became an advocate within this space, I mean, you're well renowned, as I mentioned earlier, but before you became who you are today, where were you at on the model?
I would probably say stage 3. I think that financial healing was really important because there were so many things that I didn't know. There were so many money memories and traumas and different things that were manifesting themselves in different ways that I didn't quite understand. I do not think that I could have gotten to where I'm at without some serious healing. And I think, again, just kind of going back to the model, I think it's the reason why I appreciate it so much, because it starts with the internal. If we are still being caught up in thoughts that are not enabling us to be our best selves, or that are causing us to make decisions that are in our best interest, we have to address those far before we get to the edification and the well being. I know it's still the case that we don't teach a lot about finance in school, whether it's high school, whether it's college, whether it's grad school. I know plenty of PhDs who don't know a lick about finance, and learning and unpacking some of those unhealthy habits that I had really allowed me to be not only a better advisor, but a more empathetic advisor, because the things that my clients are going through, the money problems that they are having, I have had, I've been through. So it allows me to speak from a first person instead of just from something that I read in a book.
And that's so important because you want to put yourself in the place of the end user, as your consumer, as your client, because you want to make sure that they understand that you were them at one point. You have that empathetic approach. I always say in this business, it's all about servant leadership. You have to take it from that approach versus a transactional leadership as well. So, with that being said, what was your aha moment that made you realize that the change was intimate for you?
I think it was probably the birth of my daughter. I think that, like so many things that you can have a plan for, and children really, really change your life. And my parents were amazing in everything they were able to provide for us. Well, not much. I remember semi recently finding a pay stub for my parents, and when I was in high school, I think together they were only making like $30,000, $40,000. Like, it was absolutely mind boggling to think what they were able to do, feeding, supporting, clothing, caring for three children, and everything else that they were doing. It made me really realize that I had to step up, that it wasn't under my parents' health insurance, that there wasn't anybody else paying the bills, that, me and my wife had to figure it out, and that ignorance wasn't an excuse, that nobody was going to do it for me, and that if I was going to make sure that my family was taken care of, it was up to me.
You talked about the past, you talked about the present. So, today, where are you actually located on the model?
It's like a carousel. Even when I get to a point of financial well-being where I'm focused on growing my business and trying to create this generational wealth, I know there are still things in my internal and my external ecosystem that are constantly influencing, and I'm having to deal with in real time. My wife kind of yells at me a bit because I'm a helper. I'm a helper. Like, if someone needs some help, I'm gonna find the time, I'm gonna find the money, I'm gonna find the resources to help them out. And I'm also, right, influenced by social media. I try not to spend a lot of time on there, but I see the trips and the cars and the other things. So I know that there are both internal struggles that I have and external influences that are constantly tugging and pushing and pulling on me. And so I would never presume to be at the end of this journey because I know it's not going to be very long before something puts me right back to the proverbial start and I am going through the journey again.
Let me tell you something, Brian. You're not the only person that said that. We're constantly navigating all of the stages as well as the three phases, right? The past, present, and the future. As you mentioned earlier, you may be in a stage five of your financial well being, which is great. That's your present. But then something may happen, or you're watching that Instagram or social media, or you're seeing someone that has something, a toy that you like, and you go right back, right, to stage one, your internal, external
Yeah,
ecosystem. And it really does tug on your heart because, as I mentioned earlier, although we do have certifications, although we've had a lot of accomplishments in the things that we do, right, that's great. But we are human too. And oftentimes, I do believe that people may think, or you have financial advisors or planners or educators or counselors, whatever the case may be, and we may see them and think that they have no issues. They have the same issues that we have. They're masked a little bit more, but they are equipped to kind of understand how to navigate through that. But these are trials and tribulations that we deal with every day.
absolutely.
So, one thing I wanted to talk about because you have been very adamant in terms of your profile, and you mentioned the fact that you're really focusing on helping African Americans. So, considering that you are purposely driven to support the African American community regarding money decisions, what has been the most significant pushback, and what have you done to change the narrative within our community?
It wasn't the thing that I thought it would be. I remember very early in my career, there was another advisor who said, you can't be successful in this business just working with black people. You need to diversify your work with everybody. And to be clear, I do work with everybody. I have plenty of white clients, I have plenty of mixed couple clients. It is just that my focus is trying to serve a community that's been historically underserved. And so the biggest pushback is just that we have been underserved historically. And so that means that our parents probably don't have advisors, that we don't come from a lot of money where we are having discussions young and in the house about what it means to have a stock, about what debt means, about the difference between good debt and bad debt. And so a lot of it is educational. And part of the problem is the fact that because I work with a lot of successful Black professionals, they're really, really good at whatever they do. Be it they're a great doctor, they're a great lawyer, they're a great insert profession. Like I said before, they still weren't taught anything about financial literacy throughout any of their education. And so it's a dangerous mix when you're pretty smart and you make good money. So you're not scratching and clawing. You know you're going to get another big check in a couple of weeks and you have Google and Chat GPT that can kind of fill in the gaps for you. One of my good friends, one of my fraternity brothers posted on Facebook and he was like, what are you guys doing with your NVIDIA holding or your NVIDIA stock? And I'm like, social media is great for like a recommendation for a restaurant. It's great to talk about the latest movie that everyone is. It's not great to get investment advice for. And there was a FINRA study that they released, I think it was the beginning of this year. And although we have disproportionately increased our representation as far as investing. A lot of young Black investors are really getting into it. They're also a lot more likely to look to social media for that advice and for that guidance. And there's a difference between professionals who do this for a living, who have a fiduciary standard to act in your best interest, and a influencer who is trying to sell a product or gets a kickback for everyone who signs up. And so it's been education. It has been trying to unpack some of this systematic and historical trauma that we've been subjected to, and then trying to remind them that, hey, there are people who do this professionally that look like you, will look out for your best interest, and it is worth investing in that.
Anyone that's on social media that is telling you to purchase a product or a service under the fiduciary rules, and as being an advisor, as you and I know, we are not allowed to provide any type of investment advice on social media because there's so much, suitability, it's so much going on with that. And so I would always say, and you're laughing, you're nodding your head. I would always say, if someone is giving you information to purchase a product, I always go to IUL. That's my favorite one, right? But if someone is telling you to purchase a product, the only thing you really need to do is get the person's name, go to broker check, put their name in. And if you have no information on that person, You can see their disclosures. You can see so much about that person. But if I can't find Brian Seymour, so let's say Brian Seymour is giving information as a finfluencer, and I like Brian. So I go on, I say, well, I don't see Brian on broker check. So I said, I trust what Brian is saying because Brian is not a fiduciary. And Brian knows this. And so, one last statement, Brian, I'm going to say, I'm going to allow you to answer this as well, too, because I see you're chomping at the bit here. But people ask me the question, why is it so many people trying to sell IULs? I have a simple response to that. The reason why you have so many people that are selling IUL products is because it's a fixed product. And if it's a fixed product, Brian, as you know, you just need to have a basic insurance license. And if I have a basic insurance license, I'm going to sell what I can sell: whole life, universal life, IULs, because it's a fixed product. But when I get into the other stuff, I have to have the license to do so. So I'm going to leave that there, let that marinate, but I'm going to allow you to kind of piggyback on that and tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Your point is so well received, and you made so many good ones. Interestingly enough, I had my first client ever ask me about broker check this week. And so after doing this for almost a decade, I don't know that most people know to go and to actually check that this is a service, which is so upsetting to me. And because again, it's the information is out there and you're just not searching for it. The industry hasn't done itself a lot of favors, right? Like I talk about how there are things that we could do to help ourselves to make us more of a professional. We don't always do those things. It literally seems to me like there are greater barriers to entry to cut hair or to do nails than there are to sell insurance. I literally do not understand why the bar is so low. And you would think that the people who are receiving this content would do what I tell everyone to just follow the money. Like just try to figure out where the incentives are and where they might be. To your point about the licensing, that is the old adage about, if all you have is a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. And I kind of relate it to dealerships. Like if you go to the Ford dealership and all the guy can do is sell Fords, but you really need a BMW, he's going to try to sell you a Ford. He's not going to send you down the street to the BMW guy. Like people respond to incentives. I have let people know exactly how I feel about it. I've been talking to, the American College and FINRA, and we're not helping ourselves because again, part of that pushback on our community is that we've been done wrong. Like there's been too many instances, and yeah, you can go back 100 years, you can go to the Free News Bureau and the banks and all of that stuff. But you can look at what Wells Fargo and what Bank of America and I'm sorry, I don't know if any of these are sponsors, what a lot of these large institutions are doing today to our community. And again, not to get too far on a tangent, but it's similar to like the vaccine debate when there's a lot of people in the community didn't want to get vaccinated. And whereas I am vaccinated, boosted, and believe everyone else should, I had to explain to people that remember that Tuskegee was not that long ago. We have actually been perpetrated and done wrong by this system before. So of course we have a little bit of apprehension. So again, not to go too back into the stage 1 and stage 2 of the model, but I think if we ignore these things as influences to the past leading to the present, leading to our future, then we're kind of missing the boat.
And I love how you tied the model in. Thank you for that, because it always comes back to the seventh stage generational wealth model. When we're talking off air, one of the things that I said to you that I'm really excited, I want to see you do extremely well because you're 38 years of age. So you're young. So you have a long runway. You have a lot of time that you can put into this industry. So considering that you have baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, what does your client demographic look like? And what is the target market for your products and services?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that a lot of people think that they need to wait until they're getting ready to retire to find an advisor, until they have lots of assets to manage. And again, part of that is the industry's fault. When we say you got to have a quarter million or half a million or a million, I don't know a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds that have those type of assets. But what we do know is the financial planning is important immediately. And that the greatest resource that any of us have, to your point about me being young, although I don't feel like it all the time, is time, the time that we have. And so when I think about the industry and what we can do, it doesn't help when you don't have advisors that are representative of the people that they want to serve. Not everybody is an old white man. Not everybody has been to college. Not everybody speaks English. right? And I think that when we are so narrowly focused on supporting the same type of people, it's going to perpetuate a cycle to where the same type of people are served and the same type of people are consistently left out. It is the reason why on the Next Generation Task Force, I'm pushing for more diversity. I'm pushing to recruit at more HBCUs and to just let young people know that there are so many more opportunities to be in this industry than as just a stock picker. Because I know that growing up, that's all I saw on TV is you had to go to Wall Street and you had to do this. And so I think that if we can just bring more people into the room, into the conversation, then we're all going to do better.
Here's one of my theories. I think there is 5 distinctive people within the financial industry. So you have the financial therapist, which is important. You have the financial educator, which is important. You have the financial counselor, which is important. You also have the financial advisor and the financial planner. Now, with that being said, not everybody is prepared to meet with Brian. They're not. They may be in a situation that they may need financial education. Now, having said that, the way you do your business, you're more of an educator as well too. So the person that you're meeting or the conversation that you're having, you have to identify, where is this person at? What does this person actually need? And I think what's happening in the industry itself, they're lumping everybody together and they're saying you need to have this person. And I think that there's the disservice we talked about. Let's say if that person comes to you, well, you're a financial planner. So, as a financial planner, your job is to plan. Now, as a CFP, I mean, you have a lot of credentials. You have the skill set to kind of navigate through different stages of a person, but you have to meet the person, or we have to meet the person where they're at, which is so important. And so that's why I was saying, in terms of what do you see with the pushback? Because a lot of the pushback that we're getting from the marginalized communities and within our community itself is that they may think they need a financial planner, but they're still on stage. They really stage one. They need a financial educator and a financial therapist.
That's what I had to realize because most of my clients tend to skew a little younger. We'll say between 35 and 45. But I do have a subset, we'll call it 25 to 30%, that are retirees or close to retiring. What I've learned from that latter group is that I could have so much more impact if I found them earlier. Like every single one of my clients says, we wish we would have found you 5 years ago. We wish we'd have found you 10 years ago. And so it's just kind of going back to that time. And what I realize is that everybody is not in the time of their life, to your point, to where they need to engage with me for my services as they are. And so what I actually do is on Fridays, and listeners are more than welcome to check it out on my website. I have pro bono financial planning office hours. So if there is anybody out there that needs financial planning help and again can't afford to talk to a CFP, I have office hours where you can come and I can help you and work through any of the issues that you may have. Because, I realize it's not fair to say, hey, I want to close the racial wealth gap, but then I'm only going to work with Black people that can afford, or anybody that can only afford to pay me thousands of dollars. I have to meet the people where they are. And so if people are at a place where they're at stage 1 or stage 2, I want to meet them where they're at and help them out without putting any more of a financial burden on.
That's very noble of you because, I do the same. I offer a lot of pro bono work. I remember when I got into the industry as an insurance salesperson, I worked for a company and I just pretty much sold insurance. And, one of the things that a very established advisor said to me, and I'm sure you can respect what I'm going to tell you here, what he said to me. He said, when you get to the position where you're not concerned about making money in terms of commission, then you can have more effect on people. And so when you get to the point where, like you're saying, you're doing pro bono work, it's something in terms of a servant leadership that you're providing for people because they may not be ready financially, to pay for your fee for service because it's a fee for that. I understand that. But for the most part, what you're doing, and that goes back to my education part, what you're doing is educating people. And I say this, Brian, I'm gonna call you B. Can I call you B? So
Absolutely.
so B, listen, what I always say to my clients or to anyone, if I'm having a conversation with them and they say to me, I didn't know that, I'm educating. So it could be anything. And you and I as well, too. We can have a conversation and I said, well, I didn't know that. Well, you're educating me. And if I'm talking to someone and the first they mention, I didn't know that, I've solved what I've done for the greater good. I've helped that person because I've educated them. And I always leave my meetings, pro bono work, I always say, listen, at the end of the day, you can walk out of the office or we can get off the Zoom call, whatever the case may be. You can never say you didn't know, right? You can never say that. And I'm sure you feel the same way because oftentimes we hear, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And you can say, no, 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 no. You can because you're a lot younger than I. You can say, well, no, 5 years ago, we had this conversation and I told you this, but you weren't prepared because remember the five stages: educator, therapist, counselor, right? Planner, and advisor. One of those five, you weren't ready. And it's okay that you weren't ready. So I applaud you, what you're doing. So with that said, here we go. Here's another question for you. Do you find any difficulties with Gen X and millennials, as many are internet and social media savvy and are looking for quick money making strategies? I refer to this as the microwave generation. We kind of touched on it, but do you feel like you get you get a lot of pushback in regards to those individuals because they can go Google now, they can use the internet and find things out and say, hey, Brian, I think this is what I need you to do. And you're like shaking your head. No, it doesn't work.
Because this is the best and worst thing that's ever happened to us, right? Again, we all, I don't remember pre microwaves. So, like, even the microwave generation is a little fair, but like, the fact that you can instantly get anything, be it information or food or a picture, or there's just so many things that we're not used for and we don't feel like to wait for, honestly. And part of me is like, nah, I don't want to wait. I have waited too long. I had to see my parents and grandparents wait and they never got it. I want it now. But it doesn't mean that it's good for us. It doesn't mean that it is the model that we should be following. And it is absolutely a much, 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 much tougher conversation. I was just talking to a client, actually, it was this morning. And she's like, I'm the kid of a depression. And so, no, my parents didn't go through it, but they saw their parents go through it. And that really had an effect on me as well. And they are great savers and they don't spend a lot. And I know I'm stereotyping a lot, but there is a certain history, there's a certain past that informs their present, which means they're going to have a lot more successful future. Then it's just frustrating. I have time, I'm not going to die. That's not going to happen to me. I wish I had some type of nice bow to put on it. Be like, yeah, but they're finally coming around. No, those are by far the biggest struggle, because they're people my age. It's people that are making the decisions now that could make all the difference in the world if they preheat the oven instead of using a microwave.
I'm laughing because I was that person before I became who I am,
Me
right?
too. Me
And
too.
so and so that's why I'm so passionate about, the industry because I was that person too. Now I fast forward, I'm 58 years of age. So if we looked at the three phases in terms of financial planning from 28 to 45, that's the accumulation phase. 45 to 60, that's your preservation of capital phase. And then from 60 on, that's your gifting and retirement. Well, I'm like two clicks from the retirement stage. And so I always say, man, here it is. If I'd have known what I known today, I would be in a total position. But I'm in a position that I can help people. I can give information from an educational standpoint, which I enjoy to do. And what has gifted me this podcast to meet people like yourself who's going to continue to mantle it and continue it on. And I'm gonna look back 15 years, 20 years. I'm saying, look at old Brian out there. Look at
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm gonna give him a call. Brian, remember me? Nah, who are you? No, hopefully that's not gonna happen. So here's another question
I
for
don't
you.
know.
So, where are the most significant gaps or blind spots in the average person's financial knowledge base? And second part of this is how do these gaps manifest in the financial decisions people make?
I think that so much of it just comes down to really fundamentals, really understanding how interest rates work, how taxes work, how things that you are going to deal with every single day for the rest of your life, as long as you are a living American, will affect you. And what happens is, humans generally are really just bad at large things or really small things. So it's hard for the average person to understand why taking out a loan at 7% is so much different than taking one out at 3.5. Doesn't seem like much. They're both small numbers. I see it with credit cards a lot. Just not understanding what a 30% APY means. Like how many of your dollars are actually going to service the debt. And when you don't understand the rules of the game, you're probably not going to be very good at it. Like you might get through it, you might score a couple points, but you're not going to be very good at it. And in a game, that may not mean that much. You may not get the high score in the arcade. But in real life, that means your family loses hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. It means that the memories that you could create with your family, you don't have the ability to. And when you come from a community where you don't have much to begin with, all of those extra little marginal decisions are magnified and mean that much more. And so it is one of the things where I'm encouraged to see more and more programs in through younger grade levels. Operation Hope does a lot of good work. I know Dave Ramsey's programs have been getting a little bit more prevalence throughout the schools. I know a lot of the HBCUs, like down here at Clark Atlanta, they are instituting a financial planning class that all the freshmen have to take to go through. So I think that we are making strides, but I think in the same way we wouldn't let people, drive without a license, I think that it's kind of ridiculous that we let people go out and work and invest and pay taxes and not give them any rules on how that might work.
Future wealth builders. I mean, we have Mr. Brian Seymour, who is the principal and founder of Prosperitage Wealth, a fee only RIA dedicated to closing the racial wealth gap by helping African American professionals. It's important for us to subscribe to the New Wealth Wave podcast because we get conversations such as this. This is an educational podcast, and we enjoy just giving you knowledge. We bring on experts such as Brian, who is well known and well positioned in the industry. So please make sure that you subscribe to the New Wealth Wave podcast and share the link with a lot of your friends and family as well, because I guarantee, and they don't say guarantee a lot, but I'm going to say guarantee. I guarantee that you're going to be able to pick up something from each of our podcasts. So now we're going to transition into stage 4 of the model. And Brian has, again, he's leading the discussion, and stage 4 is financial edification, literacy, and inclusion. So first question in regards to financial inclusion, what trends are you seeing that give you hope that historically more marginalized communities are finally being included in the financial industry?
Yeah, I think that we are doing better. I think that there are a lot of institutions that have made pledges, and some of them are actually putting a little money behind increasing the diversity of their workforce. Black women, honestly, whether it's the elections, the House, or the financial services industry, Black women are just making tremendous strides. They are becoming CFPs, although we're still less than 2%. I think that the American College and the CFP board are both doing outreaches to make sure that they are trying to attract more diverse representation. I'm going to have the opportunity to be at the conference for African American financial professionals down here in Atlanta. I think it's August 12th through 14th. And even the college putting together something like that is encouraging because there's not a lot of us. Like I said, we're less than 2%. So it's nice to be able to get around and to see other advisors that are successful, that are doing great, that you can brainstorm with, that you can workshop and just lean on for support. So I am encouraged. And honestly, I think social media will help. I think that when we can show that it's a possibility and Black people find out that they can do it, we tend to show out and show up and excel. I'm excited about the future diversity of the industry.
So now let's move to stage number 5, which is financial well-being. So this is how I describe financial well-being, just to give you a visual of it all. So think of a plane that's in the air and it's coming down to land. And that landing could be a soft landing. You've been on a plane several times. When the plane lands soft, it's a smooth landing and it just continues to go on. You say, oh, wow, what a great landing. And then you've had some instances where you've had a landing that can be somewhat, how can I put it, high stressed. Then I've had the fortunate opportunity to participate in a missed approach. So when you're coming down for the landing, and as soon as you get there, then all of a sudden you go right back in the air. And so when I look at financial well being, I say this is the soft landing. This is where we want to be. Well, Brian is happy and his kids, his wife, they're just having a great time. Financial health is great because that's very important as well. And the biggest thing that I always stress, what I love about it is that you don't want to outlive your income. That's the crux of it all. And so, with that being said, financial freedom means different things to different people. How do you define it and why is it important?
I was using the analogy actually, I think earlier. I've had a number of clients who had already won the race. They had more money than they needed, could retire with as much money, maybe more than they had when they were working. And they didn't even realize. They didn't even realize that they had gotten financial freedom. I think the world does such a great job, and specifically this country. Let me say, I think that capitalist society do a really good job of making you think that you're supposed to work. You're supposed to work. And the greatest compliment that I ever got from a client is he said, Brian, I owe you the world because if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have retired. I would have kept listening to those guys who were telling me to keep saving and keep working and keep investing. And so financial freedom is not just having enough money. There are plenty of people that have money, have enough, have reached their goal, and don't realize it. They're still trapped. Like the elephants, right? Like in the zoo, you nail them down on a little stick when they're just a little elephant. And then when they're giant monsters and they can rip that thing up and go, they're so conditioned to say, oh no, this is keeping me here, that they stay. And so many people are like that. Financial freedom is the ability to do what you want when you want with your time. And, for some people, it's not much. My dad reminds me all the time. He's like, hey, if I hit the lottery for like 100,000, 200,000, he's like, you're going to thought I was a billionaire. He's like, because I don't have a lot of debt. I take care of these couple things. I don't want a lot. I'm going to love and enjoy my life. And, there's other people that want it all. And so financial freedom is not a number. It is the ability not only to be able to, but to realize if you're working, it's because it's optional, that you are able to do all of the things that you need to do and all of the things that you want to do. And, hopefully that's the goal. I tell clients all the time, it's not my job to tell you what that looks like, what that finish line is, or where to spend your money. Some people want to retire at 50 on a couple $1,000s, and others want to work, forever and make a whole bunch. And my biggest thing is just to know what that number is, know what your goal is so that you can make an informed decision. You're not relying on anyone else.
That's so important because, financial well-being again means two different things to two different people. And also, when you look at it, from a couple perspective, it's important to know that too, because you have a husband and a wife or a partner, two partners, and they come from different stage ones, different stage twos. And so that impacts their financial well-being stage five. Because you mentioned what you mentioned is how you have some people that just want to work, 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 which is fine. But they're reflecting back, referencing all the way back to their stage one and stage two. It's something that happened or they seen or witnessed as they were younger that says to them, well, I don't want to be like my parents were, so I can't do that. And then I do recall when I was struggling to barely make ends meet. So I don't want to go back through that, but I have a couple $1 million in the bank. Right. I have it, but no, I need more. I need more. And it goes back to your stage one and two because we do kind of always reflect back. And that's why you're always navigating the model. You're never off of one of the stages simply because it's a holistic approach and you're constantly going to be introduced to something all the time. I love staying on stage five when you talk about the ability to absorb financial crisis, which is stage five as well. So, what are the warning signs that a crisis might be on the horizon, and how do you stress test your plan to ensure that those individuals will be okay?
There's always those studies about how many Americans would be unable to have $1,000 emergency, come up or something like that. One of the biggest red flags that I always see is just people not having enough cash on hand. I really like my clients to have at least 3 to 6 months of cash. We never know what's gonna happen, be it someone losing their job, flat tire, a hospital bill. Debt, particularly credit card debt, can be so detrimental to your plans. I liken it to trying to run a race with cinder blocks in your feet. Like it's really, really, really hard to win this financial game when you have credit card debt. And so making sure that you have enough cash on hand is just kind of like the very, very first threshold that you can check. But there are 5 areas of financial planning that I go through with my clients. The cash flow and budgeting. So we're always going to make sure that we have that on hand, but also an idea of where our money is coming and any future obligation. We're also looking at the risk management. People thought that when I gave up my insurance licenses that I didn't believe in insurance anymore. It's quite the opposite. I think life insurance is still really important. I know disability insurance is still really important. I still review the umbrellas and autos and home policies of my clients because making sure that you have your tail covered when stuff hits the fan is really, really important. We'd all like to think it's not going to happen to us. but it happens to somebody. It has to happen to somebody. And, I make the joke because I make jokes with morbid things. I don't have any insurance that I want to use, right? Like, I don't have home insurance because I want my house to burn up. I don't have health insurance because I want to get sick. Don't have car insurance because I want to get in an accident. And I sure as hell don't have life insurance because I want to die. I don't want to, but I am. And for a lot of these things, it's not about wanting them to happen. If they do happen, I don't want to be on the hook for them. And I think that most people just don't have a plan in place to even stress test, which is the problem. Because if you knew that you systematically had to, the same way when we were in school, check the fire alarms and do a fire drill and say, hey, what would happen if we don't do that? We wait until somebody calls and say, hey, your father's in the hospital. We need $7,000, or so and so died. We need to figure out how we're going to put him in the ground. This is what we wait for. We wait for life to stress test our plan instead of stressing it beforehand. And so the biggest thing is I would just say to encourage you to have a plan. Of course, I think that talking to a professional is always helpful, be it a counselor or an advisor or, a planner like a CFP. But I think that the same way that we would do with our car, if it was sputtering, or our body, if we felt sick or hurt, that seeking out a professional to make sure that something really, really important doesn't go from, kind of shaky or unknown to bad and in a much worse position is the best thing that we can do.
That's so important. I tell my clients, Brian, that there's 3 areas in life that you have to prepare for: living too long, dying too soon, or becoming disabled along the way. And once you have that conversation, many of them don't have any of them taken care of, right? But it's so true. We don't get into the other stuff, the planning, I give some homework to do, but for the most part, that's how I open the questions. That's the statement I start with. Hey, listen, there's 3 things in life that you have to prepare for: living too long, dying too soon, and becoming disabled along the way. So if you look at it from that perspective, living too long, stage 5 of the model; dying too soon, stage 6 of the model; and becoming disabled on the way, stage 6 of the model, right? So let's transition to stage 2 of the model. So we look at your expertise here, right? We're kind of going outside the box here. We said 4 and 5, but we're gonna tap into 2 just a tad here. So you speak about how ADHD is paramount in decision making, or better yet, in a person's financial genetic code, stage 2 of the model, with both trauma and anxiety. Once you recognize that you are aware of that, so once you identify that's something that your clients have, they're falling behind with, what can you do to help in charting a path of consistency in the process within your organization?
I think initially I thought that the financial planning was like just the finance, that's all I'd really have to deal with it. If I had a number and a calculator and a spreadsheet, that would be the extent of it. But to your point, the reason why 2 comes before 3, 4, and 5 is because it does help inform it so much. And I think that, my wife gets mad at me when I do it sometimes, but I think sometimes taking things to their extreme can be helpful. To say, hey, I understand that this is how you feel. I understand that you think that this may go wrong. What would that actually look like? Like, assuming that what you're anxious about actually does happen, what would it mean? Like, how bad would it be? Because I think that sometimes and often we make things bigger in our head and bigger inside ourselves than they actually are. And so I know one of the things that I struggle with with my clients is getting them to spend more money. It's the client that you talked about. They saved their whole life. They remember when they didn't have a lot of money, remember when the parents didn't have any money, and they don't want that to be them. And I literally have to beg them kicking and screaming to spend their money. And so we just turn it up a little bit. And we just turn it up a little bit. We just turn it up a little bit. My youngest daughter is in a dance camp the last 2 weeks, and after the first couple of days, she came back and she was sore. And she's like, Daddy, do you have any icy hot or any Tiger Balm or anything? And I was explaining to her, like, that's how you get stronger. You got to build your muscles by breaking them down in those little micro tears that grows back bigger so that your body says, no, I'm not going to let that happen again. And so I used to be just get over it. Don't worry. It's all in your head. And what I realized that's not what it is. That's not enough. If you can little by little, just kind of get you to constantly start pushing your boundaries. My therapist, my coach tells me to test the assumption, see if it's really bad as you think it is. Most of the times we realize that it isn't.
That's a great point. Charles Lindblom, so I'm breaking on my PhD stuff here now, right? So Charles Lindblom talks about incremental growth. And, I always tell my clients it's incremental growth, right? So, live today, but you have to plan for tomorrow, right? You have to live today, enjoy yourself today, but plan for tomorrow. So final questions for you. So first and foremost, again, we'd like to thank Brian coming on the New Wealth Wave podcast. Make sure that you follow him as well. We're going to give you all his information. He is the principal and founder of Prosperitage Wealth, a fee-only RIA dedicated to closing the racial gap by helping African American professionals make informed financial decisions. So, what do you want the listeners to take away from this podcast, Brian?
I think that you've done such a great job of providing a model for us to use to help navigate. Like I said, we don't come from lots of money. A couple of generations, it was illegal for us to own property. And so to have a map to understand why some of the things are the way that they are, I feel like is so important. And go back and listen to the other episodes. There is a wealth of knowledge that you will be able to get from each and every person. And I mean, you got to remember, I don't mean to keep throwing it back and keep talking historically, but this is knowledge that we were not even allowed to have. These were conversations that were had in rooms that we weren't allowed to be in. This is amazing information that is out there. And like you said before, ignorance is not an excuse anymore. The information is out there. It's about whether we are willing to go out and get it. And so I would encourage all the listeners the same way that I do to keep being thirsty for the knowledge, to keep seeking out sources like this where you can better yourself and better your future and better your community. I can't close this racial wealth gap by myself, so I need all of us to be doing our part.
I appreciate that. Final question for you, my man. Please provide your contact information if someone would like to gain your services.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Brian Seymour, CFP. I think there's only one of me. My website, Prosperitage Wealth. So it's like prosper and heritage together, PROSPERITAGE wealth.com. You can find me on Instagram at BKSTWO. Again, that's Bravo, Kilo, Sierra, TWO. Or give me a call. All of my information is on my website. I would love if there is anything that I can help out with. Please give me a call. Email. I am pretty responsive, and I have had so many people that have poured into me, who have taken time out of their day to help me, to mentor me, to guide me, to support me, that if there is anything that I can do for anyone out there, I absolutely have some time to pay it forward.
Man, I love that about you. Again, hopefully that we're going to bring you on again later on. So future wealth builders, first and foremost, again, we'd like to thank Brian on behalf of the New Wealth Wave podcast, my producer, Ray Haycraft, and myself. We would like to thank you, Brian, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on this episode. And future wealth builders, we hope you enjoyed it as well. Make sure you subscribe, share this particular episode as well. And as we always say, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And we will see you on the next episode of the New Wealth Wave podcast. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on the New Wealth Wave podcast, hosted by Dr. Joaquin Wallace. Our show is edited and produced by Ray Haycraft. To dive deeper into the world of financial wisdom and learn how to create your financial footprints, head to our website at www.drjwallace.com. For more updates and exclusive content, connect with us on social media by searching Dr. Joaquin Wallace. And if you have questions and comments, feel free to email us at thenewwealthwavepodcast@gmail.com. Remember, generational wealth begins with generational knowledge. And as always, thanks for listening. The content presented in this podcast is strictly for educational purposes and should not be taken as investment advice. The views and opinions expressed by our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the New Wealth Wave podcast and its host or producers. Listeners are urged to exercise discretion and judgment before making any financial or investment decisions. Always consult with a financial professional or advisor before taking any action based on the content of this podcast. If you're enjoying the New Wealth Wave podcast, we appreciate if you leave us a review. We're always open to topic suggestions and guest recommendations. Feel free to reach out to us directly with your thoughts and feedback. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the